We are recording the proceedings. And with that, let me hand things over to Luba Zieva.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy morning to join us here today to learn more about the long-range transportation plan update for our Winston-Salem MPO planning area. We're going to start with some introductions for the panelists today. And then we'll show you a brief video and then do a little bit of an overview of the plan process and existing conditions. So again, my name is Luba Zieva. I'm a senior transportation planner with VHB. We are the study team working on this long-range transportation plan update with Winston-Salem MPO staff. So happy to be here today. I'm going to turn over to Margaret to introduce herself also.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Margaret Tartalla. I'm also a transportation planner at VHB, and I've been helping with existing conditions and outreach for this MTP update.
Great. And Don, if you don't mind introducing yourself also.
My name is Don Bryce, and I'm a principal with VHB, and I'm sort of the overall technical advisor for this project.
Thank you. Byron, would you please introduce yourself next?
I'm Byron Brown, Principal Planner with the Winston-Salem Department of Transportation and MPO. I am the lead on the MPO side of staff.
Thank you. And Sherry, if you don't mind also making an introduction.
Sure. I'm Sherry Dawson with VHB, and I'll be helping with the public involvement for the MTP update.
Great. Thank you. So with that, we're going to start with showing you a brief video that's currently posted on the Plan Update website. And that's also a video you can go watch at a later point or share with some of your friends. So the website is WSMTP2045, and it's on the front page. That's a video that MPO staff or the city staff have put together, and it just explains a little bit about the MTP and CTP update process. So let's see if I can make it full screen.
Transportation planners for Winston-Salem and the surrounding area are getting ready to update their plans for improving transportation. Here's an explanation of the plans in 3 easy steps. The plans are called the MTP and the CTP. MTP stands for Metropolitan Transportation Plan.
Margaret, can we see the screen, or is it still showing the slide?
Both plans have long lists of projects to help improve.
I see the first slide in the presentation.
It can be as simple as building a.
Hold on. Apologize. I'm gonna stop the video and restart the share. I think I have to switch to a different screen for sharing for me to actually be able to show the video. So I'm gonna reshare it now.
Transportation planners for Winston-Salem and the surrounding area are getting ready to update their plans for improving transportation. Here's an explanation of the plans in 3 easy steps. The plans are called the MTP and the CTP. MTP stands for Metropolitan Transportation Plan. CTP stands for Comprehensive Transportation Plan. Both plans have long lists of projects to help improve transportation. They can be as simple as building a sidewalk or as complex as building a beltway. They're called multimodal plans because they cover all modes of transportation. Cars and trucks are a mode, so are airplanes, trains, buses, bicycles, and your feet. Both plans list future projects, but the CTP is a list of everything planners can think of that would improve transportation if money were no object. The MTP lists transportation projects we can actually afford to build. It's more like a shopping list, and that's MTPs and CTPs in 3 easy steps.
Thank you. So now we're going to bring up our slides and proceed with a little bit of an overview of the plan process instead of watching some hedgehog videos, although I'm sure those are delightful as well. Let's see. Bear with me here. All right. I'm going to share the screen again. Margaret, would you give me a thumbs up if you can see the presentation slides again? Okay, great, thanks.
Looks great.
So just to show an example of what public meetings could look like sometimes, we could all be in a room together, but again, we are not able to, so thank you all for taking the time out of your morning to join us virtually for this public input meeting. So as the video briefly introduced, MTP and CTP are both types of plans that deal with long-range transportation planning issues, and out of those two plans, a metropolitan transportation plan is more fiscally constrained, so trying to bring some of this fiscal realism into the picture. The area that we are doing this plan update for, it's the Winston-Salem MPO planning area, and as you can see from the screen, hopefully it's larger than just the city of Winston-Salem or just Forsyth County. So the planning area does include portions of Davie, Davidson, and Stokes counties as well, and then municipalities within that area. Elected officials from those jurisdictions participate on the governing body for the MPO, the TAC, which meets several times a year, sometimes monthly, sometimes less frequently, depending on how many issues are there to discuss. So that will ultimately be the governing body that will be responsible for adopting the long-range transportation plan, is the Winston-Salem MPO TAC, Transportation Advisory Committee. Part of the reason why we are doing this plan update, although as a planner, I generally think that thinking about long-term trends and planning is a good idea, that there is a federal requirement for any urbanized area with population over 50,000 to update their long-range transportation plan on a regular basis every 5 years. For some areas, it's actually every 4 years, depending on area quality issues. This gives us an opportunity to review the long-term trends and to identify those transportation needs that will be coming up and becoming more urgent in the future. And then there's also, again, this element of fiscal realism, so making a funding forecast as part of the requirement for this plan update. Those long-range transportation plans are updated again every 5 years typically. So if there's some larger trends that will begin to change and shift, and there's always an opportunity for the region to come back and update this plan again in the near future. Another important element for this plan update is that we really do want to make sure to provide this platform for public and stakeholder feedback. So we're not just trying to gather the data and crunch some of the numbers. We want to hear from the region's residents and employees and business owners as to what is really important, what are some of the trends that you're seeing on the ground, where are some of those pain points, congestion issues, possibly intersection safety issues. Maybe if you're a business owner dealing with some freight and logistics challenges, those are some of the issues that we could also reflect in the plan. So that opportunity for local public input is one of those very important federal requirements, and some of that dates back to the early history of highway building in this country, when sometimes we didn't quite take the time as a country to do proper community involvement and planning before building some of those major highway projects, and as a result there was significant damage done to communities that were being divided by some of the highways being built. So again, public and stakeholder involvement is an important aspect. And we also trying to look at a variety of modes, so not just highway and roadway building, but also taking into consideration transit needs across the region, how to better give people options to get back and forth. Also bicycle and pedestrian transportation is one of the elements being considered. And we'll also take a look at some of the rail connections, some of the freight needs in airports with the Smith-Reynolds Airport here locally, to see if there's additional infrastructure support that may be needed to help those modes function well as well. And just to note that transportation planning is a very long process to build a project forward to construction. It's not a very easy solution. So anytime you start out with long-range planning, there might be a project identified in a long-range transportation plan, but then there's additional steps involved in terms of programming and designing the project. So this chart just illustrates some of the many layers of planning that take place within the transportation planning world. So for example, there's a statewide long-range transportation plan. NC Moves 2050 is the current version for North Carolina. Then we look at the CTPs, which are looking about 30 years out, not fiscally constrained. Then we kind of narrow down a little bit to MTPs, the long-range transportation plans, which are fiscally constrained. But even once you have the project in this long-range transportation plan, you'd still have to think about the next steps of trying to get your project programmed. In the state transportation improvement program, that's where a specific funding source is linked to that project. And then if funded, the project still has to go through environmental documentation, design to get ready for construction. So again, implementing a project is no quick and easy process. In terms of our timeline for the current plan update, and again, the plan is updated every 5 years. So if it's something that we missed today, it could be done as an amendment to change something later, or it will likely be revisited again in 5 years. But for the time frame for this plan update, we are currently looking at selecting our vision goals and objectives. So we're working with the steering committee, and thank you to any members of the steering committee who might be joining us today on this webinar. We will also be taking into account the public input received through the online survey that's opening this month that should already be active. So with this input from the steering committee and from the public input, we'll be able to finalize the vision goals and objectives and project selection methodology to help us identify which projects are particularly important for the region at this time to consider for this long-range transportation vision. We will also created an existing conditions report that should be posted to the website shortly, and Margaret is going to review some of the elements of that existing conditions report, what we are seeing as far as the data about the region today. We'll also be looking at some travel demand model runs and identifying fiscal constraint parameters to move into project selection in June, and then we'll be holding another round of public meetings the second half of June, early July, and then the draft final report will be prepared in July to have another round of public outreach events in August for final adoption in September. So if somebody doesn't get a chance to provide input today, there will be additional opportunities down the road. And also a recording of this webinar will be posted online so that others can watch it at a later time if they're not able to join the session today. We have set up a public involvement support in the form of website. So if you go to WSMTP2045.com, again, that's where we're hoping to have the survey link posted really soon. There's also the Facebook page for the City of Winston-Salem, where the updates about this public meeting today, but also other updates related to the MTP plan will be posted. And then the MetroQuest survey should be open through the end of May. And then we'll again be holding another round of public meetings in the second half of June into early July. This slide is borrowed from the statewide long-range transportation plan update, NC Moves 2050. I think that's just a good illustration of how fast some of our trends and technologies are changing, and that's part of what we're trying to consider and take into account as part of the MTP plan update. If you think about where we were 25 years ago, how many new technological innovations have we seen? How have our lives changed? In some ways a lot, in some ways not so much. The smartphone certainly comes to mind as one of those technology changes that has really made an impact in terms of how we interact with the world. So thinking 25 years out, will we still have private vehicles, cars in some shape or fashion? Most likely, maybe we'll have more electric vehicles on the road. We might have some self-driving autonomous vehicles by then. I don't think that will be the majority of vehicles yet. So chances are a vehicle, a private vehicle or car is here to stay, but we'll also need public transportation in some form or fashion. We'll probably still need to have areas protected for walking. I think that being to get around on foot has been one of those core transportation modes for humankind since the early days. So I think that's one of the challenges for communities to kind of balance between areas that are prioritized for walking and bicycling access versus some of the major corridors that are prioritized for fast moving vehicles. But those are just some of the trends that you can think about 25 years out. Where will the region be? How will we need to change our transportation infrastructure to support this expected economic development and growth and change in some of the technologies and population and society overall? Probably a lot of us will be older, and that's another consideration too. Some of us will feel less comfortable driving ourselves just because of the issues associated with aging. In reviewing some of the prior plans that already exist for the region in local municipalities and counties, we've pulled out some of the key themes, and we are hearing a lot of those themes centered on balancing this traffic flow, so improving traffic flow conditions on some key corridors while also protecting your main streets and welcoming downtown. So again, that kind of juxtaposition between some areas are important for fast moving traffic, but other areas are also really important for creating that sense of place, the walkability aspects. Greenways and multi-use paths are also a main focus of many of the local plans. As well as planning for growth corridors, we are expecting to see both population and employment growth in this region over the next 25 years. Improving freight access is also an important aspect to support the local economy, and then continue and support transit operations, maybe both in existing formats, but also some new formats could be considered. Road widening and intersection improvements to support a growing region. Again, that's probably a need that will continue to be there, as we are not likely to give up on a personal vehicle anytime soon, but maybe there's some way to prioritize those in a way that makes more sense. An addition of some new connecting roadways might be important as we improve our roadway network connectivity that could help us solve some of the congestion issues instead of just widening the same corridor over and over. Bridge replacements is also one of those issues that is mentioned repeatedly. There's some of the locally adopted plans. And then there are some larger scale projects that have been considered and brought up in the past, including upgrades to the Smith Reynolds Airport. There's some potential for light rail that has been considered, and then Greensboro is considering a BRT project. So for this month, for the month of May, and one of the things we're trying to accomplish again through this public input survey is we're trying to identify a way to select the most important projects for this plan, and through providing your input into the goals and objectives and the key regional priorities, you'll be doing your part to help us identify what's really important to measure. And as we measure those things, some specific metrics, and we can identify the projects that are the best suited to moving this region forward and to supporting the region's growth through transportation infrastructure improvements. An example of one of the regions that is nearby is CRTPO in Charlotte. That's just an example of one of their goals and objectives created for the long-range plan. That's a pretty encompassing one: provide, manage, and maintain a safe, efficient, and sustainable transportation system for all modes intended to serve all segments of the population. So with that, I think I was going to turn it over to Margaret to review some of the existing conditions. I'm going to stop my share. Let's see. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Do I need to stop?
I think I got it.
Okay, great.
Looks great.
There we go. All right. And, oh, can't do that. Sorry. All right, so I'm going to go over the existing conditions for the region. So we'll look at some population and employment projections, and then the transportation system as it looks today. And then some of the other modes, including bicycle, pedestrian, and transit, what the safety of the roads look like today, and environmental justice. So an overview of the economic trends in the MPO. On the left, you'll see a graphic that shows the breakdown of employment by industry. And these employment numbers are for Forsyth County, which makes up the majority of the MPO and is how most economic data are divided into counties. As you can see, the largest segment of employment is in the education and health industries. And we see that mirrored in the table on the right, which shows us the top 10 employers in Forsyth County. So you can see that those first 5 are all either a university or the city and county public school system or one of the major medical centers in the region. Rounding out that list of the top 10 employers are the city and county governments and major retailers like Walmart. So looking at the employees in the MPO, we can look at two major data points, which are educational attainment and median income. So these tables show us Forsyth County representing the MPO, the Triad region as a whole, and then the state of North Carolina. So you can see, looking at educational attainment, that Forsyth County has slightly higher high school attainment, and then quite a bit higher at 34% of employees have a bachelor's degree or higher, which is significantly higher than the Triad region as a whole, which is around 25%, and slightly higher than the state as a whole. So that educational attainment is reflected in the median income, both for households and per capita of the MPO. We can see that household median income tends to be around 50,000, which is quite a bit higher than the Triad region median household income of 43,000, and just under the state median income. So now we'll look at some of the commuting trends. This graphic on the left is showing us where people are living and working. So the center circle is showing us that about 107,000, or the majority of people, are both living and working in the Winston-Salem MPO. Those that are living in the MPO but are commuting outside of the MPO for work are around 80,000, the light green arrow pointing towards Greensboro. And of those people that are commuting outside the MPO, the majority, about 15%, are traveling to Greensboro. Slightly fewer people are commuting to either Charlotte or the Research Triangle. And then we also have a substantial amount of people that are living outside of the MPO, but commuting in for work, and that's around 92,000. So next we'll look at some of the anticipated growth trends. So these numbers come from our regional travel demand model and the numbers that were adopted for that model. And we'll look at 2017 as our base year and projecting out to 2045. What are the population and employment trends we expect to see out into the future? So you can see for population, we are expecting population to continue to grow. About 27% from 2017 numbers to 2045. Looking at a map of where we expect that growth to be, so just to quickly orient you to this map, the light green dots are showing around about where population is for our base year, 2017. Each of those dots represents 50 people. And so the dot density is showing generally where those people are placed in the region. So we can see it's pretty dispersed. And then the dark green dots are showing us where we expect the growth to be as we go into the future to 2045. So you can see that the majority of population growth is expected in the existing municipalities, particularly Winston-Salem. But we also have quite a bit of growth where we expect some future developments that we know are going to be built. And otherwise, it's fairly dispersed throughout the region. So looking at expected employment growth, we expect it to grow considerably and more than population growth. So population growth, we were expecting about a 27% increase. And for employment, that's about an 81% increase in the region. Again, looking at the map, the light blue dots are showing existing employment roundabout where it is, and the dark blue dots are showing where we expect an increase in employment by 2045. So you can see it's much more concentrated than the population growth, which makes sense. We usually have employment and offices in fewer areas, and houses tend to be spread out. Again, majority are in existing municipalities, including Winston-Salem, and also other areas like the Triad Business Park out near Kernersville. Just a general look at the transportation system overall, we have some of the major roadways in the area, the 3 interstates, I-40, I-285 going south to Charlotte, and then I-74. And we also have several US routes and North Carolina state routes that are important roads in the region. There are 2 transit systems that are serving the MPO. The first is the Winston-Salem Transit Authority, and that has 32 fixed routes that run constantly. And then there are also TransAid and the Kernersville Senior Shuttle, which are paratransit and an on-demand transit service. The regional transit for the MPO is run by the Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation, and they have 5 regional routes in the MPO. So this map is showing us the traffic volume, which we use a measure called annual average daily traffic, or AADT, to show us an average of the traffic volume on those roads. So these are only North Carolina owned and maintained roads, because those are the roads we have numbers for. But you can see that typically the roads you would expect are those with the highest volumes. So this bright purple color is showing us the roads with the highest volumes, and that is I-40, which has in some areas up to 112,000 vehicles per day. And then US 52, which has the second highest number of vehicles per day, just north of I-40 business. Some of the other large roads are I-285, I-40 business, of course, and NC 67. This is a map showing the projects for 2020 to 2029 that are in the State Transportation Improvement Program. So Luba explained this earlier, but these are projects that have gone through the state's strategic prioritization process. Looking at safety on the roads, this is a map that shows us the section safety score for each of the road segments. The section score is a North Carolina Department of Transportation measure. So this is showing only those roads owned or maintained by North Carolina DOT. But essentially the measure is a combination of the frequency of crashes and the severity of crashes. So the roads we see that are the bright red roads are the ones that have the highest score or the poorest safety performance we would expect. And that's because they tend to have more crashes and more severe crashes. So as you might expect, the roads where we have the highest traffic volumes are also showing up for the poorest safety performance. There are roads where we have more vehicles traveling, and so we tend to have more crashes. And they also are typically roads like I-40, the interstates, and US routes where we have higher speeds, which tends to correlate with more severe outcomes. The red dots on this map are showing the high frequency crash intersection, sorry. So those are the intersections in the region that have just the highest number of crashes, not necessarily the most severe. This is a table that shows us where those intersections are, the total number of crashes that's found at each, and then the severity. So looking at that, you can see while there are a lot of crashes at these intersections, they're not typically fatal or serious injury crashes. And they tend to be at, again, the roads that have the highest traffic volumes, including I-40 Business, US 52, and then some local roads like Silas Creek Parkway and Haynesmont Boulevard. This is a look at the freight network. I-40 is the only primary freight corridor in the region. And we also have the rail lines on here. There are rail lines that are operated by both CSX and Norfolk Southern, which are the main freight operators in the country. There isn't any passenger rail in the Winston-Salem MPO, but there is a bus service run by PART, which runs from the High Point Amtrak station. This is a map that is showing us the existing bicycle and pedestrian and shared use path facilities in the region. I apologize because this is sort of zoomed out view, so it's hard to see exactly where things are. But we can see that generally the sidewalk is, for the most part, in Winston-Salem and to some extent in some of the smaller cities and towns. There's about 550 miles of sidewalk throughout the MPO. And there's also about 30 miles of shared use paths. The solid lines are showing us where those are built. This dashed green line that runs from Cornersville west and then north up towards Bethania is the existing proposed route for the Mountains to Sea Trail, which is the only statewide trail in the MPO. So looking at safety for bicycles and pedestrians in the MPO, we can see that particularly for pedestrians in the last few years, there's been a substantial increase in the number of crashes. Bicycle crashes have remained more flat over the years, but there has also been a slight increase in the past 2 years or so. And this is for our latest data, which is the 10 years between 2009 and 2018. The red line at the bottom is showing us all non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. And we can see that that's also remained relatively flat, even as the total number of crashes has gone up, the severity of those crashes hasn't increased to the same extent. The majority of the crashes are occurring on major arterials, which tend to have higher traffic volumes and higher speeds, but also tend to be where people are still crossing. And those are roads like US 421, NC 150, and Silas Creek Parkway. So here's a map showing us where exactly those pedestrian crashes are located. And the red dots are showing us fatal crashes, and the green dots are showing us all other crashes. So we can see that most of them are in Winston-Salem itself, although we do have a pretty widespread of fatalities, and they tend to be on major routes as well. This is a look at bicycle crashes. Again, the green are all crashes besides fatalities, the red are the fatal crashes. And we can see that they also tend to be more so concentrated in Winston-Salem, but the fatal crashes have occurred in more rural areas. So this is a look at our environmental justice analysis, and we do an environmental justice analysis to make sure that we're not having a disproportionate negative impact on vulnerable populations, and also that positive benefits of our transportation network are spread out between populations. So this map is showing us a score for each block group, and a block group is given a point if they have a higher percentage of the population that falls into one of these 6 categories on the right. So that's everything from households with 0 vehicles, limited English proficiency, higher poverty than the region in general, and then several minority categories. And on the map, you can see we've overlaid the transit routes. So these yellow lines are the Winston-Salem Transit Authority routes, and the purple lines are the PART routes. And that's to give us just a quick glance at the map look at whether services like transit are actually reaching traditionally underserved populations. So the darkest green block groups are where we expect higher concentrations of those traditionally underserved populations. And then that is the last of my existing conditions information. I can show the survey next, or do we want to go back to the website?
Margaret, if you don't mind showing the survey next, that would be great.
Let me see. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay,
Good.
perfect. Thanks. So this is our survey, which is available both on the project website and the Winston-Salem Facebook page right now. And it is available both in Spanish and English. There are links for both, but if you come to the English survey and you need in Spanish, you can do that once you're in the survey as well, and vice versa. So this first slide is just a welcome slide. We have some information about the project at the bottom. You can scroll through and read them to get some good background information and watch the video. I think the one we watched at the beginning of this presentation. So once you look through that, you can go to our first screen, which is asking about priorities. So on the left here, we have a list of different priorities. If you click on one, you'll see on the right, it will pop up an explanation of exactly what we mean by the description of each priority. And then it's asking you to rank each, or your top 5. So you decide which are the most important to you and just drag it above the line. And it'll tell you how it's ranked as you drag it. So let's just put a couple up here. If you decide you want to switch things around, you can change them and it'll change the ordering, or you can even put it back. And you have an option to comment if you would like to comment on any of the categories or your choices. The gives you a map and asks you to put some markers on the map. So we have things like destinations, places you want to go, where you might have a safety concern, where you think there's a need for transit, aviation, bike ped, and roadway options. So you can zoom in and out as you would like. And let's see, do an example. So I did live in Winston-Salem at one point, but it's been a while. But let's see. Say we have a safety concern.
The Trader Joe's. There's always crashes, I'm sure, in the Trader Joe's parking lot.
We can drop it on the map, and then we have a drop-down menu, which gives us some options about why the area is unsafe. So we have everything from speed, no pedestrian facilities, noise pollution, visibility. We'll just, and then you can add an additional comment to explain more about what you mean. Let's try another one. traffic and roadway. So what concerns, again, you have a drop-down menu that has different common traffic and roadway concerns. And let's see, I'll say congestion. And again, you have a chance to comment. So each of the icons will give you a different menu to choose from. The next screen allows you to indicate your preferences and priorities by giving you a budget and letting you spend it where you think your major priorities are. So we have several categories on the right, everything from maintenance and repair of roads to transit, and you can decide how much you want to spend where. So if transit is very important to you, you can pull a big 10 over there. Maybe these all seem very important, but maybe advancing technology isn't as important to you, and so you give it 1. And so that shows us where your priorities are weighted to. And if you ever are not sure about what exactly you need to do, there are instructions on each page, and there's also a what to do button at the top. Looking at our last wrap-up page, we have a thank you up here, and you can watch the video again, and then we have some questions about you specifically, so we can make sure that we're getting input from all sections of the community that we want to get input from. And then I think this will take you to the project website. Maybe?
And Margaret, just to add a comment, we are hoping to get the survey link up on the website and the Facebook page in the next day or 2, but for now, those links are not yet on the website or the Facebook. So stay tuned, but we will also be posting a recording of this webinar, so you can go back and find it again. So that's makingconnections2045.metroquest.com. The link is active, we just don't have it posted up on the website just yet.